A Much-Needed Jolt by Stephen Brown. Chapter 1. There was a sudden cracking noise. Looking downward, Charles grimaced to find he had killed yet another snail. Its gooey, mucus-filled body smeared between the shards of its shell, like some macabre mockery of nachos. Nachos. How long had it been since he had last eaten? How long had he been trapped underground? With a sigh, he attempted to scrape the goop off the bottom of his shoe, but the concave walls of the underground didn't offer much in the way of cleaning terrain, or nothing obviously visible at any rate. Power had failed in various sections of the underground system, and although an emergency backup had fired up, it hadn't been maintained well. A smirk crept on his face. Safety, it seemed, was yet another victim to austerity. Foreboding shadows had pooled together, making various tunnels unappealing to the survival instincts that Charles possessed. He had considered using his phone as a torch, but it dawned on him that with power being so intermittent, perhaps batteries should be saved when it was absolutely necessary. This felt big, he mused. This wasn't just some terrorist attack. It seemed like some kind of coordinated disruption. What for, he couldn't quite hazard. He lacked information. He paused for a moment. Every now and then he would hear a far-off conversation or footsteps. Not much else, though, which was worrying and feeding into his hypothesis. Bar the occasional ambient noise, the bulb was charging as the lights flickered, echoing footsteps and the jingle of keys and change in his pocket. It was quiet, maddeningly so. No beeping horns, traffic light warnings, car engines, or the general hubbub associated with the city could be heard. It was a crushing silence. The underground had changed. It had at least quadrupled in size, and there were lots of extra junctions and dead ends. It seemed filthier and mank. An odd smell hung in the air, not unlike busy changing rooms from his childhood. Just travelling across junctions, the air took on a skeezy texture. Footsteps alternated from ever so slightly sticky to suspiciously smooth. He dared not look down after the first few uppers. Being a regular user and having had to cover a myriad of stories from across the city had made him confident in the usual layout. But something was going on. He suspected that the lack of food, smoke, and/or coffee was beginning to affect his judgment. Rounding a corner, he found signs of humanity and civilization. Commerce. Charles attempted to adjust his tie and jacket. He looked a little rough, but no worse than someone out on an all-night bender. Checking his breath was fresh, he stopped beside a shiny poster frame and assessed his look. He was all right looking, he supposed. Certainly enjoying the beard he was rocking at the moment. It added that much-needed distinction that he thought he lacked. He splayed his fingers and hastily combed them through his hair. It was dark brown, but the occasional silver strand had made itself present, and for every one he plucked, it would soon be replaced with another. He hadn't been overly obsessed with looking younger, though. He was more concerned with fitting into his trousers as he was developing a slight belly. Squidging his paunch, he noticed he was getting soft. Perhaps it was time for another tour. Clearing the hair from his face and the coal from the corner of his eyes, in his dusk he flicked it away. Charles had a quizzing face. He wouldn't accept the first answer you gave. He'd give you a long, lingering look, way past the point of politeness, solely out of suspicion. He had unnerved some, gotten him slapped, on a few occasions, and offered back for coffee. It was one of those mini-shops that usually littered stations like these. The windows sparkled and smelt of lemons, and the exterior had been swept and maintained, which is why the large unconscious man, collapsed between a few gondolas, caught Charles off guard. Looking around the store, he almost didn't catch the cashier who silently stood by the till. The cashier was quiet and unassuming. Indian-looking, Charles supposed. Then reflection may be Bangladesh. Smart, short hair and clean-shaven. Genuine smile which was odd for his profession. Extremely relaxed, which set Charles at odds. He closed his eyes for a second, then looked at him. There was a little drop of blood on his name badge, and his sweater seemed a little stretched. His arm was in a sling. "Good day, sir?" the cashier offered. Charles almost leapt out of his skin. Composing himself, he opted to mind his manners. "Good day, sir, though, to be completely honest, my sense of time is a little wibbly." He took out his phone. It read 14:38. "What time do you make it?" The cashier was using the sleeve of his left arm to wipe blood from his name badge. Charles could make out Rajesh or something close to it. The cashier became aware that he was being studied, stopped his preening and offered. "My clock says 2:42, if that helps." Charles nodded, getting closer to the counter. Rajesh had bound his entire forearm and used a spare uniform to make a sling. Charles turned to look at the unconscious gentleman. Squinting, he figured maybe 6'4", which gave him maybe a foot on Rajesh. He didn't even bother trying to factor the weight difference. Sleeping Beauty was a tank of a man, wrapped in a painfully fitted suit, while Rajesh was of slight frame, almost painfully so. Though it was clear that he could obviously take care of himself, and was confident he could deal with his assailant when he awoke with one arm. A chilling thought crossed Charles' mind. He went over to check the giant was still in his mortal coil. Noticing the rise and fall of his chest, he relaxed. Releasing a sniff of amusement, he turned back and spoke to Rajesh. He started, briefly forgetting what he came in here for, till his stomach prompted. I'd like 20 Benson hedges and a couple of sandwiches and a Snapple, please. Rajesh collected his items and placed them on the till. That would be £20 and 96 pence, please. Unconsciously, he cleaned the rest of the blood of his name badge. It actually read Rakesh. Charles retrieved his wallet and went to pull his debit card. Rakesh stopped him. Card reader's not working, mate. So he went for some notes instead. And neither is the till, sir. He got damaged in an argument. His gaze minutely shifted to the suited tank. Charles almost missed the movement. So, how do I pay? You don't. As soon as it hits 5, I quit. Rakesh pulled off some canned coffee, several packs of cigs, and loaded it into a nice carry-out for Charles. Offering a business card and thanks, he accepted the gift. As he shook the cashier's hand, he noticed how warm and almost plush it felt, like a peach's fuzz. It was reassuring and somehow familiar. Rakesh, I have a feeling that whatever is going on isn't relegated to the underground. So, if you need a contact, give me a call if you're able. Rakesh nodded. The slight expression of worry flitted across his face, but it was replaced with an awkward smile. You know, mate, he relaxed the professional voice slightly. You seem pretty calm considering what happened the last time some shit went down on the ground. Charles snorted in amusement. Making his way to the sleeping giant, he considered his next move, raising his right arm. He said, "Read my business card." He slapped the big man hard, rousing him from his sleep. He filled his vision, ensuring that he was the big man's sole focus, and whispered something. The man's eyes widened, then he leapt up and ran out of the store. Rakesh read the card. "Reporter?" he shrugged. "So?" Charles, a little dejected, made his way to the exit. "I've covered wars, kid. Let's hope that's not what's happening here." He waved and left. Finally, alone to contemplate the day's events, Rakesh exhaled. It was long, satisfying, and deeper than you would expect from a frame as he possessed. All the hair in his body stood up as he flexed and stretched his arms. Soft clicks and pops cascaded down his body as he shook himself loose. Casually discarding his sling, he probably would have been terrified that his arm had healed in less than an hour, but he was so embarrassed he didn't realize. He tutted. He was so skint, and he had somehow managed to tear the soles from his shoes during his altercation with the big man. However, the thing causing his skin to slightly redden was the biscuit-sized hole just above his butt cheeks. She would never let him live this down. Sighing, he hunted out for some duct tape and pulled out when he ran his fingertip across, cutting perfectly. Something about that struck him as odd. Shaking, he slowly opened all his fingers and checked his nails. They looked normal. His brow furrowed, and for reasons unbeknown to him, he squeezed his finger. Charles had reached an area lit by natural light. Leaning back against the wall, he tore open a sandwich and wolfed it down. Tears streamed down the sides of his face. It had been quite a while since he'd been this hungry, and the memory was not pleasant. Shaking the memory, he finished the sandwich and tipped all the crumbs into his mouth. He barely registered that he was eating meat, something he'd given up for at least a couple months, in a desperate ploy to get into the pants of someone he worked with back. It looked so good. It tasted so good. And he considered the two options, and the new paradigm set by whatever the hell was going on. Riley, he chalked up the potential loss and swallowed, before washing it down with a Snapple. In the distance, he thought he heard a scream, but it was so muted, he wasn't sure. Holding his breath, he sat still for a couple minutes. He could hear the breeze at the top of the stairs, and the occasional creak of something. There was no other usual sounds of life at all. The escalators had stopped. The masses of people who'd used the transit system were absent. The buskers had disappeared. The telltale crackle of security walkie-talkies or paramedic radio were all dead. That is, except there. A confident footfall was getting closer. Charles smiled with relief, but it slowly faded when he realized that he would be completely alone with whoever it was. He checked his pockets. Wallet, keys, phone, gum, and USB key. Nothing to really use as a weapon. For a moment he considered emptying his bag, apart from the cans, to make a makeshift club, but that might mean running and leaving food. It was time to blag it. Quickly tidying himself up, wiping the dust off his shoes and straightening his tie and trying to knit his hair further. It was a confident step, no hesitation at all. He tried to focus, but was perhaps a little tired. Grabbing a cig, he sparked up, and in a little rush, he kick-started his confidence. It was getting closer now. He could make out the clink and the jangle of a harness. Catching his reflection, he noticed the slight scruffiness of his beard. He made a mental note to snag an electric razor as chance came about. One more corner, perhaps. No matter. People generally tended to trust older bearded men, so he could lean more on the authoritarian prestige it offered. Then he remembered secondary school. He took a deep, deep drag of his cigarette, in case it was his last.